discussion before about the 4 types of love and what we understand the 4 types of love. And we know that in the Greek language, there are actually 4 different words to describe the types of love. So let's review them again together. The first kind of love is called eros, and it's a passionate love. And this is actually, when we think of, that romantic type of love, we're thinking here, this is eros, okay? It is a very selfish love. It's very much about how I feel and how that person makes me feel. It is it's a kind of love very much about taking more so than giving. You make me happy. I'm with this person who makes me happy. I have these feelings when I'm with that person. And then, we talk about, when that love fades, then what am I left with? When you no longer make me happy. Okay, so that I don't love them anymore. I lost that loving feeling. Okay, what is that? That is, there's no more eros. Okay, you used to make me happy. You no longer make me happy. Okay, this is the kind of love of the object. So, for example, sometimes we obviously use the word love very loosely, right? And I love this food, I love this. What does that mean? Like, it gratifies me, okay? And so that selfish gratification is really the meaning of this type of love, this eros love. Okay, and then phileo or philia is an affectionate, warm, and platonic love. So this is the kind of friendship love. Okay, this is the type of love that does have where you are giving more. It's not just about selfishly receiving. Okay, it's the give and take in a platonic, non-romantic type of sense. Okay, and then storge is the family love. So this is the love between parents and their children, your siblings, your extended family. This is the familial love, okay? And then this is the best kind of love, okay? The most pure kind of love. This is when we talk about God is love, this is that type of love. This is the most pure, selfless love. This is the unconditional love that sees beyond the outer surface, that's unconditional, that's sacrificial, and that's giving and expecting nothing in return. Okay, so this is actually the love that we as human beings, we are, because God is love and we're created in His image, we have an innate desire to love and to be loved. Okay, and really the kind of love that is satisfying to us is the kind of love that God gives us, which is the agape love. And the kind of relationship and how He wants us to show love to others is this same kind of love. But unfortunately, sometimes we seek it in the other kinds of love, and then we're disappointed when we don't have it. Okay, and then when we get confused when we say love fades, or we fell out of love, or I no longer love him, or those kind of things. That's because we never actually reached the agape love, because that's not that kind of feeling. That's not a self-gratification where I'm seeking to be fulfilled, just me in that kind of relationship. So unfortunately, a lot of where we say, they had a relationship and someone ended up with their heart broken or things like that, they were looking for this, but they were stuck in that. Okay, and that's where many of us have pitfalls, where we're looking for love, a kind of unconditional, selfless love from others, or we are looking for the kind of commitment and things like that in agape love, but we're actually, the kind of relationship that we have with someone is eros. Okay, whether or not that's how they feel about us or that's how we feel about them, but that's the dynamic of the relationship, and that's where broken hearts and all of those, the sad love songs and whatever, that's where all of those are from, okay, is because of that, looking for love in all the wrong places and looking for the wrong kind of love and expecting a kind of love which you're not in that agape relationship, you're in an eros relationship. Mm-hmm. And so it's very important for us to understand what is love and what kind of what we're actually seeking when we begin to talk about marriage and seeking the right partner. So before you even begin to look at the right partner, you have to make sure, are you getting married or seeking marriage for the right reason, okay? And what are some of the right and wrong reasons? Because if you start out with the wrong reason, first of all, if you start out with a wrong understanding of love, then you're setting yourself up for failure. And then if you're getting married for the wrong reason, then you're setting it up for failure. Okay, so first we have to understand what kind of love that we're seeking to give and to receive, and then we have to understand if we're actually seeking marriage for the right reason. So some of the right reasons are to be unified, right? Because God created them male and female, and then the two became one flesh. So if we're seeking that unity, that's a good reason to get married. Okay, we're seeking agape love. We're not seeking how that person makes me feel, or that person gives me, or that person makes me feel special, or they give me gifts, or they whatever. When I'm actually going into agape love, or that's the relationship that I'm seeking, I'm actually looking to give. I'm looking to make someone else happy, okay, sacrificially. So we have to have the right motivation, the right understanding of why we'd be seeking marriage. For sharing the life together, right? God didn't want Adam to be alone. He saw that it was not good for Adam to be alone. And when you actually look, he sent the disciples and the apostles out 2 by 2. There is an important relationship with unity, okay? Supporting each other. When I'm weak, when he's weak, together we're strong. And so sharing a life together is an important part of seeking a marital relationship. One of the most important reasons is obviously salvation, right? We're supporting each other to reach ultimately the kingdom of heaven together and our family with us. So the relationship should be both for your spiritual growth and their spiritual growth and eventually your family's spiritual growth, that the two of you come closer to each other and come closer to God. And to have godly children. If God gives you children, then to raise godly children who praise God. Yes?
So just kind of a minor sidetrack here.
Okay.
And you guys are ready for this kind of stuff. So this is a really important point to remember when you're trying to go towards that idea of marriage. A lot of people say, well, it's not really important for that person to be Orthodox, right? Oh, Christians are Christians, right? Catholic, Protestant, whatever. It makes a difference. It really does. When you have a life partner where you share everything, where you have children, where you're trying to come together as a unit, when you're going together in a certain direction, those minor differences, they're going to etch at you, and they're going to grind at you, and there are going to be problems after day after day. And really, honestly, if you're at all serious about your faith, marrying somebody outside of your particular group, it's hard. It's really hard, and I've seen it in a lot of my friends who have gone down that path. My cousins have married, all different kinds of people from different churches, and it's a nightmare.
Yeah, we'll actually talk about compatibility, and that kind of conversation is really good. So we can, I know a lot of these things are things that we've heard in different things, but we kind of want to put it together and see what we can glean from it collectively, and see what your experiences and your thoughts are. A lot of the wrong reasons, again, will lead us down a very difficult path of marriage if we're already getting married with the wrong concept of love and getting married for the wrong reason. A big one is social and cultural pressure. So one of the things that I won't even say just for the Egyptian community, but I would just say for the community as a whole is throughout your entire stage of middle school and high school, when you start becoming aware of the opposite sex and becoming attracted to others. We as parents try and teach you that opposite sex is the devil. Okay, stay away from it. Like nothing good is going to come from this kind of relationship, right? Stay away with it. And then you graduate and you go to college, and then we're like, so did you start meeting the right person? I see you talking to this person a little bit longer. Is there anything there? And it's really just very, very confusing, right? And then obviously you're starting to feel pressure, right? You're starting to feel pressure. Heaven forbid you go to a wedding with your parents and then there's somebody that they think is eligible there for you. It's going to be very embarrassing. They're going to do a lot of things that embarrass you. So there's a lot of pressure. Okay?
No.
Social, cultural pressure.
That never happens in our culture. That's not Egyptian.
Yeah. It's actually, yeah.
Poor Gareth.
Yeah, we didn't have a talk that if she talks to a guy for more than 5 minutes, he's it. We didn't have that talk.
That's what's coming.
She's recording time. That's it.
Yeah. Okay, so social cultural pressure is a big one. Okay, and sometimes you just, you start thinking that maybe, like your standard, all the things that we'll talk about, you start like, lowering your standards just because of the pressure that you get from everybody. Okay, money's sometimes a big one. Okay, it is true that people who are married, statistically have higher income levels and they're more financially stable and things like that. That's true. But sometimes that's actually that's what you're seeking. Okay, before you ask anything else, what does he do? Or what does she do? Or what's her family like? And that's a big motivation, okay, is to go up a socioeconomic status level. And the next one I have on there is status, okay? And status can be, socioeconomic. It can be, you want to have the trophy wife. You want to be the woman who's married to a guy with this profession or whatever it is. And that can be a big motivator, okay? And that's kind of like, could be number one on your resume list, okay? And there's all kinds of reasons that, obviously, if you build a marriage foundation on that, then what happens when that shakes? Okay, and what happens actually after you already got married and now you have that? What about all the other things that you didn't look at that are going to cause you problems in your marriage? Because, that was the big motivator. So, and sometimes it's just to have kids,
I don't want a husband, but I want to have kids.
Yeah, and we'll say like, kind of more on the women's side there. You want to be like, you feel ready, like you want a baby, you want whatever, and then this guy kind of has to be part of that package, So, but he's not. He's
baggage.
Part of the package. So that's not the right motivation. As a matter of fact, marriage and having kids, and God said, "Be fruitful, multiply." But a marriage and a family cannot have kids. Sometimes you don't have kids. So, but you're nonetheless a family, and that's what God created when He established Adam and Eve. He didn't give them children right away. They are the nucleus of the family. So shouldn't be just the goal. And then, of course, to serve me. How many of my husband will do this? He will do this in the house. He will get me this. On these occasions, he will do these things for me. And vice versa. My wife will cook, and he's looking for a maid, like I don't want to do laundry anymore, I don't want to cook, I don't want to do groceries, those kind of things. And, both of those people are going to be in for a rude awakening when you get married and you're still doing all those things. Or when you get married and he's doing none of those things. So,
it's so funny because it's true.
Yeah. So again, we want to focus on the agape love, the giving. Okay, what are the right reasons? It's not about receiving, because then, you're gonna have marital problems right from the get go if you go in with the wrong intentions. Okay, so when is the right time? The first thing that I want to say is it's very important I love this verse, and I love the word fullness. But when the fullness of time had come, there is a fullness of time. There is the right time. And God has that right time. And Isaiah 60 verse 22, when the time is right, I, the Lord, will make it happen. Sometimes all the things that we talked about before, pressures internally, externally, all those things, make us feel like this is the time, or we are beyond the time, or, heaven forbid that you've already graduated and you're actually working, then there's pressure from everywhere. And you feel like this is the time. What else? What's the next stage of my life? It's now. God has the time, and there's a fullness of time. And it's when the partner that He has for you is ready, when you yourself are ready, when the circumstances in your life are ready. And again, the goal is all of the things that we said before, but in God's eyes, right, is salvation. Salvation for you, salvation for your partner. And so you have to have that faith in the fullness of time and His timing. But stage of life-wise, ideally it would be towards the end of college or after college, okay, when you've ultimately reached the highest level of education that you're seeking. A minimum age of 18. So this is actually not just, laws of like governing laws, but also our church. Okay, you need to minimally be 18. And just kind of keeping in mind maturity levels and our stages of growth, males and females. If you look, historically, we'll find that women tend to marry at younger ages than men. Okay, I know that things have somewhat changed recently, but women tend to mature earlier than men. Having said that, usually between the ages of 25 and 30, that maturity level equalizes. Okay, so when you see, younger or women getting married younger into older men, usually it's like in the early 20s part or before. Okay, but obviously the ideal timing differs for everyone individually. Okay, our stages of life, our own personal spiritual growth, just where we are in our careers, where we are in being ready for a commitment and being ready for a different stage of life. So it's different for everyone, but there's a range that we would expect. And the reason that we say that is younger than 18 is very emotional. Okay, it's not, you're not really at a mature level yet. A lot of the feelings that they have, and people do get married at 18 or younger. They shouldn't, but some states, like if they'll allow it if there's pregnancy and things like that. Okay, but that's a very those marriages being successful are very rare. Okay, any questions on timing? Okay, so choosing the right person. So we want to look at different areas of that we should examine and that we should be mindful of when we're choosing the right person. Spirituality, compatibility, family, and feelings. Jumping right in, so spirituality is very important, and this is kind of what Nether was talking about. And the Bible tells us, do not be unequally yoked together with unbelievers. For what fellowship has righteousness with lawlessness? And what communion has light with darkness? And that's in 2 Corinthians. So what does that mean? What does that mean? Does that mean everyone in this room has to marry someone who is Coptic Orthodox? Okay, what does it mean to us? Anyone? Okay. Obviously, again, our goal in this relationship is to grow closer to each other and grow closer to God. Okay. That dynamic and that balance, do you think it would work if it's one-sided? Okay. How do we feel about missionary dating? Missionary dating, the concept that this person is very far from God, but I'm going to bring them closer to God when we get married.
Doesn't work.
Doesn't work. When we get married.
No.
It doesn't work. Okay.
Well, but the premise is false. What you just talking
Missionary
about.
dating.
That, yeah, that I'm going to bring that for. So this is a whole completely different lecture, but the premise of I'm going to fix that person, I'm going to change that person, I'm going to draw that person. I mean, people change, true, but the core of the person after 20, 25, 30 years or whatever, that's where it is. I mean, that's not going anywhere.
Yeah.
If you go into a relationship from the beginning thinking I'm going to fix this person, and regardless of the spirituality, you're going into it for the wrong reasons because you're not.
And you're doomed to fail. I mean, that's
You're
not
doomed
going
to
to work.
fail.
Period.
Yeah.
Yeah. So what I want to say is it's not really a yes or no question. I mean, what it is when you are getting married, was that person seeking God to seek God? That doesn't mean that they were born whatever, your Orthodox religion. Obviously, we are Orthodox, and that, we know this is our strength in our faith. But do they have to be born that way to? No. But if they are seeking the relationship with God, and the Holy Spirit is working in their lives and bringing them to faith, okay, they're not seeking it for you, and that's what I want to differentiate. And this is the missionary dating part. Okay, it's not that that God doesn't lead people who we have great saints that started out as pagans, right? So we know that God is always seeking His children and bringing them to the correct faith. But the point is, are they seeking God or are they seeking a relationship with you? And this is a difference. Okay, if they are seeking God, then you're both seeking God. Then you're equally yoked because you're both seeking God. Okay, but if they're seeking you, and they're going to get baptized and come to the church and do whatever that because it's important to you, but not to them, and they don't really care, they're kind of indifferent, or they're willing to go along with it just for you.
You're in it for the ride.
Right. Then that's not going to be the relationship that's going to lead you both closer to each other and closer to God. And that being unequally yoked is there, okay? Are they a growing Christian? Are you a growing Christian together? And actually, one of the things that, it's not, especially in spirituality, it's not just about choosing the right person, it's about you yourself being the right person. So are you a growing Christian? Okay, when we're seeking marriage, are you a growing Christian? Are you coming to church and Bible study to grow closer to God or to meet someone that you might like? Okay, are we going to conventions to hear, and to learn and to grow? Or are we just trying to open up the horizon and kind of meet other people that are outside of our network? So it's not just about looking at the person that you're looking for, but also looking internally. And it's, preparing for marriage is not just seeking the right person, but it's becoming the right person too. Okay, and that's an important part. So that relationship with their relationship with God is very important. Okay, and the other side, sometimes people bring people to church here. They're not really strong in their faith, but because their parents won't come to their wedding if the other person doesn't get baptized, so they bring them here, but they're not really strong in their faith either. Okay?
Can I add to,
yes,
you bring up an excellent point, because, and I think that's why the time, that engagement is so critical and important to identify those gaps. But just because that person may not be directed, may not know the path, and you get to know that individual, male or female, in group setting, at church, and you identify that, that he may be the right person, I just don't know, or she may be the right person, and you may find that you both have the same goals. One may be lagging behind, but I think that's critical during the time of that getting to know one another, be it engagement or prior, to help each other grow together. So just because if you set an unrealistic time frame for yourself, by this date I need to get married, or with this date, I think as you come together, that time will become much more clear, because you're both in that direction and that pathway to God. Together,
right. Mm-hmm. And growing Christian doesn't mean that you're at the same spiritual level, right? That's exactly what you're saying.
Yeah.
Is that, and that's fine, because then, we can bring each other to God. Yeah. But is it a priority in the first place? Is it not just as a priority? Sometimes people are resistant. Sometimes people, feel like, when they don't have a spiritual connection, they just see the church as a lot of rules and regulations, and they're willing to do those things just to ultimately marry the person. And I really want to highlight that it might not be the person that they're bringing to the church. It might be the person that's in the church, and he's just doing it as a formality to please his family, to please Abuna, to do whatever. But he doesn't really have a relationship with the church either. So how can you bring someone in and have them have a strong foundation? Now they still can, especially if you're in a strong church that that the priest and the servants can help to guide the person coming in. But sometimes the person in the church themselves who's bringing them in doesn't have that strong foundation either. So again, it's not that you're already at a saint level. It's just, are you a growing Christian? And are you is the relationship with God the center of your life? And really to have a successful Christian marriage with accomplishing the goals that we talked about, that Christ should be the third person in that relationship, bringing you closer to each other and closer to Him. Go ahead.
This might be a little tangent, and if it goes into like an in-depth thing, we don't have to address it right now, but I noticed, Mike, when you were saying, like, when you get to know the person either like with engagement or beforehand, are you like essentially saying that the time you get to know a person is during engagement specifically?
I think there's things that are revealed during the engagement that you'll discover you wouldn't have discovered prior, and you want to identify as much as you can by the time marriage happens, because after that, when you do get married, there's things that obviously you're not going to identify prior, but you want to do your due diligence to know, is he yanking my chain just to get to know me, and he's really doesn't have that relationship, or doesn't have that clear laser focused goal to have that relationship with God. And I think during that critical period of engagement, I can't even stress it enough, is that things will happen. And you will discover, you know what, he may not be at my spiritual level, but wait, there's progress.
So is there like a phase before that? I guess what I'm trying to say, like, because
talking about
I've had this debate before, like about dating versus like when is the actual time that you're supposed to get to know the person, because like with dating it could go into like another like intimate kind of thing where you're pursuing a relationship for the wrong reasons, whereas like engagement you're confined to that, like,
So
I don't know.
So if I'm understanding you correctly, so I think the issue that you're stumbling on, and tell me if I'm wrong, is when you're in the engagement period, your focus is set, right? You're working towards a goal. So other things like building the relationship and getting to know the person, those are kind of secondary goals to what you're trying to get to is the marriage. Right? And this is a complete topic, I don't want to hijack it, but so the issue of dating is, ask yourself, what are you getting from the dating relationship that you don't get otherwise? Right. This was my big point when I did this topic in Delaware, and I sat down with the youth group. I was like, look, any argument you can give me, whether it's I get to know the person that I like, I get to know what I like, I get to know what I don't like, see the person's interactions. All those can be flushed out without the intimacy of a one-on-one dating. Okay. And I'm not saying every time you meet a person it has to be a big group of 30 people. You sit at one end of the table and he's at the other, you know what I mean? But honestly, these social interactions, you're not stupid, right? You've lived your life, you have friends, you male and female, and you've grown up with other people, and you have friends at school and friends in college, and you know what you like, right? The question is, will this person have more pluses than minuses? Okay. And once you've determined that, then you can move on to the next step. But there's honestly there's no real reason other than people want to date. There's really no reason to.
But even to that, I mean, the first thing Suzette brought about the spirituality. If you're coming to church, you're coming to Sunday school, you're serving. Is that person open and transparent and those are vibes that you're going to start picking up on. That is his goal as well. And these things come out over time. It ain't going to be for a week, 2 weeks. You can play the game for a couple of months, but you can't play the game for a year without identifying that relationship with God. Is that a set goal of his as well?
Thank you.
Yeah, you're right. And again, just to go, wrap this up and make sure that we're having the same understanding that being unequally yoked is not just different denominations or different, but it's different spiritual goals. Okay, is God first? Or if you're both seeking God, He will draw you through the work of the Holy Spirit closer to each other and closer to Him. Okay, obviously, the strong Orthodox faith, but we want really to focus on spirituality, the spirituality of the person, not somebody coming to church and actually has no relationship with God, because that's not going to be successful in your marriage either. Okay, and someone coming to church not to seek God but to seek you or the relationship, and someone who is already in church and bringing someone again to just for marriage, not actually to seek God either. So the Christ being the center and having the relationship with God, and obviously the relationship with the church and with the sacraments and all of these things too, but the seeking is not the relationship with you or the marriage, but it's seeking God. Okay, so compatibility, and this is very important. So in Romans 15 verse 6, St. Paul tells us, "Now may the God of patience and comfort grant you to be like-minded toward one another according to Jesus Christ, that you may be with one mind and one mouth glorify God and the Father of our Lord Jesus Christ." So what is one here? What is St. Paul referring to that's important for us to be what? One-minded. Okay, unity of the mind. So this is where the compatibility is very important. So we want to look at our background, culture, education. And I don't mean compatibility equals being identical. Okay, that's even if you're actually seeking someone who's going to be identical to you, when you get married, you're going to realize you're not. Okay, because we're different. We're different genders. We're different backgrounds. I mean, people who are in various cultures that that marry cousins, it's like they still have problems even though they're the same family. Okay, because there's going to be differences. You're not identical with anyone. You're not identical with people even in your same family. Okay, But the goal is not to be identical. The goal is to be compatible, okay? And there are things that make marriages more challenging. That doesn't mean that it's impossible. If there's cultural differences or educational differences or age difference, it doesn't mean that it's impossible to have a successful marriage. It can just make marriage more challenging. So you should just, kind of be aware of that. So what are some compatibility things in life that we should be when we're looking at the other person? And again, it's not just choosing the partner, but it's being the right person. So when you ask these questions about the person that you're thinking about might be the right person, you should ask yourself these same questions. What am I doing? Okay, so how do they spend money? How do I spend money? How do they serve others? And how do I serve others? How do they respect other people? How do they respect the lowly? Okay, those people that might not have the various resources or whatever that we do. How do they treat them? Are they showing any kind of addictions to anything? Are they stubborn? Are they hard-headed? That's not going to go away after marriage. Okay? I know that we think we can change people, but we can't change people. God can change people, and we can definitely pray, and there's going to be things that not only you discover about your partner, but about yourself when you get married, okay? And God can change hearts. But do not, again, when we talk about missionary dating, we think I'm going to change that person. And you're not, because you really, if you think about it, can't change yourself. Okay, it's only through prayer that God can change us and change our hearts. But don't go in accepting something that you know is going to be very difficult for you to deal with, but thinking that you're going to change them, because you're not. Okay, it's going to be a big, go ahead.
And I think part of that too is knowing what you want the answer to be. Like, me and my wife, we have completely different ideas about how to spend money, but she would a lot of times she tells me, like, I'm glad that you have a better understanding of how to budget the finances than she does, because she would just go out and go on a shopping spree. So I mean I'm saying it as a joke, but no, honestly, you sometimes you really do want somebody who has a opposite opinion on something that you do, because it balances itself out. Now, do I lose that argument sometimes? Sure. Sometimes.
Yeah. Compatibility is important, and actually that's functional, because if you have one person that never want to spend money on anything, and one person wants to spend money on everything, both sides of that spectrum, is difficult when you're by yourself. But when you have a partnership and you have balance, but understanding that to have that balance, there's going to be friction, right? Because you each have different ideas. But these are kind of questions. How quickly do they lose friends? Are they okay to lose friends? Or are they in the relationships that they do have, are they committed? Are they able to be committed? And are they able to keep their private life with your spouse exactly that, private? That can be a big area, especially for women who talk about everything, and that can be challenging. Did you want to say something?
I'm having a problem with the stubborn, hard-headed. That
Are you male?
It says Egyptians.
The thing is, and obviously you're not going to find a perfect person, and none of us are perfect people, right? But some of those things, if you don't see it during the engagement period, you might be okay with it. And again, you're compatible. Maybe you're somebody that gives up on things easily, and you actually admire in the other person that they are hard-headed and stubborn, and they're going to see something to the end. That might be something. We actually, when they say opposites attract, we are attracted to people who have qualities that we don't have. We find that attractive. But it's those very same qualities that make marriage difficult. Because now,
And also there's like two sides of being stubborn and hard-headed. I mean, sometimes stubborn and hard-headed means like, stubborn and hard-headed towards your goal lives, that you're not going to give up, that you're going to do whatever you want, and they're stubborn and hard-headed. For your partner, it's like, no, like, this is my way or the highway type of thing. So I think, like, you could go both ways on the stubborn and hard-headed thing.
Right.
On how the person perceives it and how the person acts on it. So.
right. So there's not if they are this, then do this. This is about asking if you two are compatible. So that's why you're not just asking what the person's nature and character is like, but then what is yours, and are you compatible in that way? Okay. And then, how quickly, this is a big one, how quickly do they forgive other people in their lives? How quickly? Because you two are going to disagree on stuff, and you're going to have arguments, and then how long is that going to last? Okay, and that's an important part. So you might not have it during the dating, courtship, engagement period. I'm sure eventually you will when you start making decisions together of where you're going to live and what. And this is kind of the difference between the dating part and the engagement part. The closer you get to the wedding and you have to make choices together about your lives, then you start to see areas that you might have conflict. But yeah, if you look at the person, are they ambitious? Are they greedy? Am I ambitious? Am I greedy? Am I lazy? Are they? If we're both lazy, that's going to be a problem, right? It's going to be a big problem. So it's important to start looking for those elements of compatibility. And then culture. Who are their friends? What kind of things interest them? What kind of what's their social media footprint? And are you okay with that? How do they spend their time? And are you okay with that? Because you're going to be spending that kind of time with them. What are their hobbies? What do they like? If it's something that, football season, you don't see him, for that amount of time, you have two options. Either you start liking football. I'm not looking at you, Mike, or anything.
My wife did. she loves sports.
Yeah. Okay. So you either like it, or you develop a hobby in the fall that you can do on your own during that time. So those kind of things, because they really do lead to conflict after marriage. And a lot of times we saw it, we just didn't think about it. We didn't understand it. We didn't get it. But it's not new. There are a lot of things that you're going to find out that are new when you get married, but there's a lot of things that were right there before you, but you just didn't really think about it. And then personalities. Personality is important. Are they jealous? Are they competitive? Are they punctual and and not? Is that a problem for you? Do they want to own everything? Are they materialistic? Or how quickly and how easily can they say sorry? And how quickly and easily can you say sorry? Because that's going to be very important, right? Because we're going to do a lot of things that upset each other, and how quickly, how humble are we to admit our faults and to say sorry? Again, if you're dealing with somebody that's a girl or a guy that's exhibiting some jealous behaviors during the engagement period, and you think it's cute because they like you a lot, that's going to drive you crazy when you're married. Okay, so you need to talk about it and think about it, because you might see glimpses of it during the engagement period, but then it could be very difficult when you're married. Okay, family. I know we tend to think that a relationship is the man, the bride and the groom, right? But bride and grooms, don't just, they're not, cut from a tree and then that's just them. They come with a family. That's a package, and so. Not only is a family potentially depending on the distance and where you live, and that involvement in what the family themselves, like how involved and close knit and engaged they are with each other, but also there's a lot of family culture. If his mom was doing X, Y, and Z, he kind of has an expectation that you're going to do the same, and that's where a lot of also conflict happens, right? My dad used to do this in our house. Why aren't you? Because those kind of things. So understanding the dynamic of, when you meet his family, when you meet her family, looking at the dynamic there, how respectful they are of each other. Do they fight in public? Do they how do they handle conflicts within the family? Looking at that family dynamic, because that family dynamic will be part of your family, right? That's not to say that people are always identical to their family. There's obviously things in everybody's family that you want to avoid in your family, right? But it's important that you have that discussion, because you need to see where the other person. Go ahead.
I just want to add that this particular, I'm glad that you brought it up. This is unavoidable. There's no way you're going to fix this. You're going to find this being an ideal situation. The only way you can overcome that is how strong your relationship with your husband, because it will need both these people to overcome these kind of problems, and they will always be there. Don't kid yourself. 90% of the time, these issues will exist.
Right. And then, obviously, also during the engagement period, if there's discomfort in the family with either or, we don't really think he's the right guy for you, or vice versa, we don't think she's the right guy. You should listen to what they're saying. Oftentimes we want to discount that right away, and it could be, but we have to understand. And if either side of the in-laws already comes with reservations you have to understand what that impact would be on your marriage. Okay, so they may be offering good advice. They may be seeing something on one of those other compatibility things that you didn't see. So you should pay heed. Pay heed to that. Obviously, along with your father of confession, your spiritual father, the servants who are guiding you. But also, take the advice of your family, take it into consideration, and see if what they're saying, if they see something that you don't see. But then also understanding if they come in with those preconceived notions, what that could play on the dynamics of your marriage after. Okay, so feelings, and then so we kind of go back to love again in the 4 types of love. Feelings can be overwhelming, and this is what you said, Sarah. We go into the engagement part, then there's the more, the romantic one-on-one time, and then are we really at that time able to objectively evaluate if we're compatible because we're overcome with all of those feelings. And so that is hard, and there is a reason that God created our mind above our heart. We should not close our eyes or be blind. We really do have to be diligent, and that's kind of where those important relationships that are around us that we talked about, our spiritual father and our family and friends, they can sometimes see some things that we're overlooking because we have all these strong feelings. So don't allow the feelings to mask, because when we talked about the 4 types of love, there's actually a really good sermon Emma Yusuf has about the chemistry of love. And that eros love, that feeling of attraction, there is chemistry. Okay, there are various endorphins and things that are released when you are attracted to someone, and it really can. And when we say love is kind of blinding, it does. You see things through rose-colored glasses, but those endorphins with time diminish, and then the glasses come off, and you actually see reality. And when we're working towards agape love, repeated good experiences with that person actually releases different types of chemicals. And then actually, husband and wife who've been married for many years, they actually have a stronger love than the eros love, because you have multiple repeated experiences that are good with that person. And it actually releases things that are somewhat similar to what you feel when you take painkillers. Like you actually feel comfort and ease and stuff like that when you're with them long term. So just kind of, being understanding that there is chemistry, there are feelings and emotions that can mask us or help cover the things and make us avoid using our judgment and our wisdom and actually even heeding to the advice of those who are around us. Okay, so just kind of quickly, these are 10, but we're not going to go into them in detail, but and more when you go through. So Emma Yusuf has a premarital seminar that you go through before you get married, so you'll get a lot more of this. But I think it's important, even as you are in this stage of life and thinking about marriage and choosing the right person and becoming the right person, of what it actually takes to make a marriage successful, so that you have an understanding of the kind of expectations and the kind of behaviors that, as you choose this partner, how you should both be interacting with each other to have a successful marriage. So the very first one, again, is always going to be spiritual. Okay, it's always going to be God's presence in the home. This is the number one. And actually, if we're lacking in all of the other things, God's presence can help us to have all of the next 9 things that we're gonna talk about. So in Matthew 18 verse 20, God says, "For where 2 or 3 are gathered together in my name, I am there in the midst of them." So we have to understand that our home is going to be that church. And it just takes 2. So 2 of you gathered there in His name makes your home a church where His Spirit dwells. Okay, where there is the presence of God in your own home, because the 2 of you are united together there in His name. So everything that we are lacking in, and all of the behaviors that we'll talk about, or any of the personality or characteristics that may be incompatible or lacking, the presence of God there can make the home united. The second one is selflessness. Love does not seek its own. We know, the love chapter in 1 Corinthians 13, and how important God tells us. Of course, we know that God Himself is love, and then He tells us all of the important characteristics of agape love. but understanding that it's selflessness. And this is very hard because egos don't just go away on the altar when you get married. Okay, this is very difficult to do because a lot of the other steps that we'll talk about require humility and selflessness. And when we think about love in the romantic sense, we're thinking about the person doing for me and making me happy. But actually, if we are seeking the agape love, the presence of God in the home, and the second step is selflessness, okay, and not seeking our own, but seeking the happiness of others, our spouse. The next one, this is actually very important. This one is respect. Ephesians 5:33. Nevertheless, let each one of you in particular so love his wife as himself, and let the wife see that she respect her husband. What two words do we see here that jump out at you? The role of the husband towards his wife is love. And what is St. Paul telling the woman that she needs to do? Respect. I cannot tell you how many family arguments or arguments between husbands and wives, when you get down to it, you ask her what really is bothering you, and she'll say, he doesn't love me. And then you ask him, what has bothered you the most about her? She doesn't respect me. Okay? And so this verse is actually very important because our relationship as men and women and how we communicate and all these other different things, when there's conflict and a husband exhibits certain behaviors, not necessarily expressing love, so she feels unloved, and sometimes because of her behavior, he's not, expressing terms of endearment, and so she feels unloved, and then so how she responds to that, or she could initiate is disrespect. Okay, so it says how do you love someone who's disrespecting you, and how can you treat someone respecting you so he doesn't love you? So it's like this is a very vicious cycle. Yeah, a very vicious cycle for men and women, and women not feeling loved and men not feeling respected.
Well, also baked into this is just miscommunication.
Right.
Like there's I'm sure you've all heard this, the 5 love languages or what it's called.
Actually, I think we have. Yeah.
Right.
There you go.
Yeah. So I mean that kind of feeds into that, right? Because like a lot of times, like I'm the type of person that likes to do things, right? I'm not necessarily very good with expressions of love, but I like doing things and taking care of the family and whatnot. And a lot of the times, what it ends up being is that's not how she received it.
Right.
Yeah, and I think it goes back to the agape love. When it's unconditional, it's not about me, it's about us. And that cycle doesn't exist because you're not going to have the issue. Because if true love, you respect one another, you love one another. There's no pre-hidden conditions. There's no games. There's no, the forgiveness is immediate. It doesn't linger.
Right.
That's what agape is.
It really is, and that one, how we perceive each other and how we communicate with each other is a big part of that. So if a woman wants, for example, she wants to get her husband to do something, nag, and I'm kind of being stereotypical, but nag, okay. So and then it comes with, oh, of course I knew you wouldn't do it. So then it becomes destructive too, right? So he doesn't feel respected, right? She's not approaching it the right way, not at the right time, and those kind of things. He doesn't feel, respected. And then she feels like, oh, he can do it, but he chooses not to because he doesn't love me. And then it becomes this pride struggle. Go ahead.
So where do you think the crack has occurred?
Where's the crack have occurred?
At that point?
In the marriage.
The crack is really with human nature. We have fallen
Yeah,
natures.
they started very well. They met all the things that you just mentioned.
Right.
They got married, and then this problem.
This is actually very good because that was going to be our topic. Is that lost, that loving feeling, right? So this was actually at One at Anthony. It was called Into the Wild Part 4, and if you want to listen to it, it was really good. But I think he brings these like 2 Mr. and Mrs. Potato Heads. And then he starts bumping them into each other and stuff. So stuff comes out of them, right? So then what is coming out of them? Like anger, just all kinds of frustration, resentment, disrespect, all these kind of things coming out of them. Did the other person put that in you? Did Mrs. Potato Head put that anger and frustration and temper into Mr. Potato Head? Or did Mr. Potato Head put in her, the disrespect and the, inappropriate words and, the whatever she's calling him or, belittling him or no, it was actually in both of them already, but that repeated friction that happens in our relationships brings them out. Okay? So brings what's inside of you. When you say someone is bringing out the worst in me, what has to happen? You rub against each other and you bring what's inside. So
are you saying these things are, everybody has them, but
Right.
they're actually they're inhibited unless
someone
someone brings
and I
them.
wouldn't say everybody has. I think we have different things. Like we have, we have different. Obviously, we have the same levels of every sin in all of us, but we have different triggers and we have different weaknesses and faults. And that person, when they rub against you and cut in, bring what's inside out. And actually, from a spiritual sense, that's really what God wants. We're kind of like, and this is the thing is I didn't want to go too much into that because what happens is when married people like me give a talk about marriage, we start talking about all the bad stuff. And it's very discouraging. It's very discouraging because, you guys are, have a romanticized version of love and then, old married people like us bring it down to reality and tell you that, it's going to be very difficult.
I don't have it.
And okay, and so, but it's not. It's actually a very beautiful relationship. It was the very first relationship designed by God, and it's effective. And again, the goal is salvation. So God has already seen those things that are inside of you, and He puts that person, the right person in your life, not just to bring you flowers and to keep your home clean and it's to bring out that stuff that's inside out. So you work on it. So this person in your life, that's your partner, you're going, walking together like He has sent the disciples and apostles 2 by 2 to support each other on your path to salvation. And part of that is bringing the hidden and the unrevealed things that are weaknesses in you out, so that it can be dealt with. And then then you become, as you go through a successful Christian marriage, that sandpaper actually becomes like a well-oiled machine. Okay, that smooth, well-oiled machine because you rubbed against each other and you've softened each other. Okay, so
Something I was actually driving to church this morning and I was listening to something on the radio, and these couple have been married for 50 years. 50 years, and husband studied, having Alzheimer's, and you listening to him, he's just diagnosed, and you listen to him describing his wife. It was just beautiful because I think it does get better. Just to wrap something from you saying earlier, you have these ideas when you're romanticizing and all this stuff. Actually, you still have that 50 years later. But it's so much deeper, so much more beautiful. And each stage, this year's, I'll be married 25 years. I could say, hey, this is the best year ever. And in 5 years, I'm going to say it's the best year ever, or years ever. So I think it's so premature and so early on in the beginning years because you're just finding one another. But as you move on, I think it gets better and better.
it does get better, and that's actually the relationship that God wants for us. That agape love. We unfortunately come in with eros ideas, and by the time you get to agape, there's work. I mean, like anything that's good in your life, it doesn't come easy. It comes through work. But it does get better, and especially gets better if you're both good, strong, growing Christians, and God is working on both of you. And this is, again, where foundation is spirituality and Christ in the middle. If all of those things happen and God isn't there to bind the two of you together, that's when there's breakdown and your marriage falls apart. And instead of you growing softer and more refined to each other, that's where we start building gaps and barriers and things like that's very difficult to break through. Okay, so communication, obviously, and communication needs training, and we communicate differently, and we have different methods of communication. Timing, you know, the important, very important part. There are times to talk about our differences and things that frustrate us and things that we would like the other person to work on, or the things that we need to work on. But it has to be, you know, in the right time. It's not when he came home from work and had a long day and you're starting to give him his laundry list of all the stuff that he did wrong, okay? And it should be constructive. Independency of the relationship. And again, this is where we come back to boundaries and family. And this is exactly what Ronas was saying. How strong you two are together, because you're going to have challenges with in-laws and challenges with, you know, friends that you may have had prior to the marriage and things like that, that you had different dynamic of your relationship with. So it's wisdom and how to manage those boundaries. So for example, you know, if a mother-in-law is, you know, still used to being very central in her daughter's decision making and wants to kind of carry that into their marriage with good intentions because she knows better, that's going to cause conflict because you now have a new family and her role is not to be, you know, that guide in that new family. So wisdom that instead of this coming from the son-in-law pushing the mother-in-law out, it should come from her daughter, okay, keeping the boundary with respect, love and respect to our parents, but still at the same time setting those boundaries. And that's you know, an important part. And the stronger you are together, the more you can overcome those challenges and those hurdles. The same thing? Yes.
I just want to add one thing that, remember, the mother sees you as a competition. You are taking away someone that she was very dear to her. Hopefully that's your bad luck if you have ended up with a mother-in-law like that. But a good mother-in-law should never think this way. If it turns out to be this is the case, what do you do about it? That she is
Relocate.
with you.
I was thinking that just what I was saying. Relocate.
You go to Texas.
Yeah, you move.
So Mike,
Here comes Texas.
Take it back to the
I love my mother-in-law.
They have phones now.
Jesus answered.
Jesus answered.
What did Jesus do, right?
Jesus said to relocate.
So you basically have to overcome that by letting her have her way in a sense, but without compromising your relationship with your husband. It is always about accumulation, because you're not going to get rid of her. She's not going to go out of the picture. But these are the kind of things. Accumulation is very important.
And this is where you both need to be praying, and this is where you need to both be very spiritual, because some of these things can really be very difficult. And some relationships, you know, like, you know, in-laws and things like those are going to be, you know, so intertwined in many parts of, you know, every holiday, like how stressful are those events in your lives where even if you relocate, they are coming and they're, you know, and you have to be united to deal with that successfully. Okay, financial management, intuitively you know this, right? That among the biggest fights that couples routinely have is managing their budget, okay? This is where you're sharing a life together, meaning the decisions the other person is making reflects on you, okay? So, you know, if they've spent or if they don't or if they whatever, that's like the day-to-day stuff that you're gonna deal with. And so you have different goals in spending. You have different, you know, just different ways. And sometimes some of the decisions that the partner has made was before you got married. And this is an important conversation to have during the dating and engagement period, because they might come in with already some commitments financially and some debts and some, you know, already certain habits and things like that. And, you know, how are you going to deal with that together? And are you okay with that? Okay, but money is a big source of stress and conflict in
May I
marriage.
say one thing here?
Yes.
This is probably the #1 cause of divorce in America. I don't know if somebody can check that out, but 50%, maybe more, is because of this issue here. And the only advice that I give to you as someone that's been there, done that, just keep it simple, is when it comes to these kind of issues, you have to ask yourself, what is marriage all about? Marriage marriage is all about the other person. It's never about you. You really married to care for that person. You didn't marry for him to take care of you. We always have it the other way around. And that's how you get over this kind of issues. You're not focused on your needs. You are focused on his needs, and vice versa.
Right. And this kind of also ties into when we talked earlier about, you know, how do they treat the lowly? How do they treat the needy? What do they, you know, do they serve? You know, do you have somebody who's unwilling to give, and that's a big problem for you? Things like that. So these are important, and it needs a lot of transparency. And as much as you can have that transparency during the engagement period, would be very important. And then a holy physical relationship. This is like if we say that you know, financial is number one, probably this one is number two. Different ideas of the marital relationship, and this also has a lot to do with you know, your thoughts as you are growing, you know, your perception of the physical relationship, you know, cultural, familial, those kind of things really play into a role. So just to really understand that this is an important part of relationship. If one or the other is selfish about it, it can really cause a breakdown in the marriage. And we have to know that, like St. Paul tells us in Hebrews 13, that marriage is honorable among all, and the bed undefiled. So it should be a loving, giving, again, knowing that God is, you know, in number one, and number two is being selfless, like Ramez was just reminding us, and also in the physical relationship, seeking to please the other and not denying each other, and not using it as a kind of, you know, as a way of
Getting your way.
getting your way,
fulfilled.
being manipulative, and, you know, and also being selfish and being fulfilled for yourself and not really caring about your partner. Like, I mean, it's just we can use this and we can twist what God has created to be a pure relationship between the husband and wife that actually makes them closer. We can use it to actually push each other apart. So, you know, having a very you know, this is a dialogue that you actually need to have, you know, throughout your marriage.
You know, in as much as the world takes care of item number 6, Satan takes care of item number 7. There is also a very hidden danger there. It is how you, when you're married as a husband and wife, I'm talking to men now more than women, is how you interact with other women in society, whether colleagues at work, church, and wives are very sensitive to that. They may not be telling you, they may not be talking about it, but the holy physical relationship is not just physical, it's also mental. You may be there physically, but your mind is somewhere else. And these kind of things, in my mind, the mental part is a lot more dangerous and divisive than the physical part.
Right. And then when this is unfulfilled correctly in the marital relationship, it also causes a lot of problems outside the marriage. And actually understanding, so it does take education on both the men and the women to understand how your partner views, you know, and understand that there's gender differences. Men see this as very mechanical, and women are very romantic about it. And it's important to understand what is satisfying to your partner so that you can have, you know, a relationship that satisfies both of you. Okay, the expressions of love, and we mentioned this briefly, the 5 languages of love, touch, gifts, time, words, actions of sharing. So knowing what your language is, knowing what the language of the other person is very important so that you are expressing in a language that the other person understands. Submission, we usually think of this as being important to wives, and it is. And if you see that that your future potential wife is having a difficult time in the engagement period, you know, when the two of you are coming to make a decision and you have possibly different ideas, but ultimately there has to be a decision made. If she's unwilling to submit to you during that time, she's not going to submit to you when you're married. If she's disobeying her father, if she's, you know, disobedient to her parents, then she's not going to obey you when you're married either. Okay. Now, this is as Christ loved the church, right? And as Christ is the head of the church. So that takes the wisdom from the man as well. And there will be times when he submits selflessly, okay? Not because he has to, but because he wants to out of love. And so it does go both ways. So submission is going to go both ways, but it is important for you to see that your partner, your potential wife, is able to submit, because ships that have two captains, all the things that we know, it will sink. So we do have to understand the importance of the dynamic and the different roles that we have in the marriage. And you can kind of also see, when we look at families, what's happening, what's the dynamic in their family. Okay.
Suzette, could
Yes.
I add one word on this
Yes.
thing, because I have 3 daughters and have trouble with this one. Let me tell you one
It's turning
thing.
into therapy.
So, this is for all the ladies in this room that are like my daughter. Submission is strength. It's not weakness. Only strong women submit to their husbands. That's all I can say right now.
And it's actually very true, and there is so much blessing for women when they submit to their husband. Even if she sees her husband doing something that's not like the best decision that she thinks, okay? Being willing to submit and to pray, it works miracles. Submit and pray. And God can change his heart, can change his decision, can change the consequences of the decision that he's made when you are faithful in this. And one of the actual sermons, I know we're going over, so I don't want to go too much, but one of the sermons that I heard that was really good on this is, if you recall when Mary and Joseph, after Christ was born, the angel appeared to Joseph and told him to take your wife and go to Egypt. He did not appear to St. Mary. Her safety was in obeying Joseph. If she said, "Are you kidding me? I just had a baby. I'm not making this long trip." Then her safety would have been jeopardized. But it is that guidance of God was in her obedience to her husband, even though it didn't make necessarily sense to her, and it wouldn't be her first choice to make a journey like this. But her safety came, and the provision that God made was in her obedience to her husband.
Yeah,
Good
just
point.
a quick comment on the whole submission thing. I think it's interesting that it's such a lightning rod for people. Like when I go to work, I don't. I mean, my boss is a woman. I don't go to my boss and tell her, "Well, you know what? I don't feel like submitting to you. You're not my supervisor today." It's not realistic, And then this is an administrative thing. I mean, I know it's hard to think of it that way, but just like you were saying, the angel appeared to Joseph, and then Joseph let Mary know that we have to travel. It's just so that things can flow.
Right. But it offers, it's difficult, but it offers a lot of blessings to both the man and the wife.
But more importantly, it offers a path, right? Whether or not you can argue about the point and whatnot, but then if the guy makes the decision, the guy has to own it, right?
Right.
And it's also, and I don't want to take for women to take credit of that, but when you submit to your husband, that's how you gain control.
To an extent, yeah. Because you don't have him, he's more willing to listen to your opinion and all those things instead of argue.
Because you're gaining his respect.
Right. And this is actually one of the bigger areas where men don't feel respected.
Interesting,
Right.
right?
When
And
you-
trusted.
Right, and trusted. So, yeah. So this is a very important one. And of course, commitment. And we kind of touched on this a little bit when we talked about personality and, what kind of relationships do they have with their friends, and how quickly do they lose friends and turn over friends, and those kind of things. But a lot of times when we hear this verse in Matthew 19, so then they are no longer two but one flesh, therefore what God has joined together, let man not separate. And this is not just man externally, but the two of you. Okay, God has joined the two of you, and we're human, we have faults, we have weaknesses, and we can separate ourselves from the marriage. But there's always hope. There's always hope. God can again reunite, and God is the one who can overcome even things that we've fallen short in, and He can help us overcome the barriers that we've created with each other. But again, when we go back to the summary together, we have to know that our goal is to have agape love, the selfless, sacrificial love that Christ Himself was the example for. We have to seek marriage for the right reasons. We have to trust in God's timing. And we have to not only choose the right person, but we have to be the right person. We have to look at our spirituality, compatibility, our family, and make sure that our feelings are not overwhelming us and not helping us when we're making wise decisions. And again, the keys to a successful marriage is the presence of God and knowing that love is selfless and doesn't seek its own, respecting one another, communication, independency of the relationship, financial management, a holy physical relationship, expressing love, submission, and commitment. Okay, anybody want to add? Or, no, thank you very much. Thank you all for participating.
Do you mind if we post the
The PowerPoint?
presentation?
No, yeah, you're welcome to.
Because I think it's a great topic.
It's really good.
So with the video live in Facebook, we'll add the presentation for somebody to just go back and look
Yeah.
at it.
Just send it to me, or you can just attach it. Just attach
Okay.
it.
Thank you.
Thank you.
That's great.